Welcome everybody to the first day of week 12. Next week is spring break, so we're going to have a midterm on Friday. We'll be doing the midterm review on Wednesday. Today we're just going to talk about some cool new things. You do have a thing on the Therac 25 that is due on Friday. It is your job to research it, find out what caused it, find out what bad assumptions people made in making it, and that kind of stuff. So make sure you check on Canvas. That is a thing. It's a 10-pointer, so make sure you do it. It's worth a lot of points. So don't skip on that one. I want to see before we begin how people did on the quiz, because it's a very simple quiz. If you'd watched the lecture, you would know the answer to it, and it's one of the things where I will just occasionally just check to see if people are actually watching the videos and paying attention. So this was an April Fool's quiz, and the quiz statistics show half the people are watching the lecture. All right, so we'll do more of these. Basically, the ratio of men to women domestic violence. If you had seen the lecture, you would know the number. Okay, or possibly you didn't remember, one way or the other. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit more on the. We've been talking a lot about science, the problems with science, things like that, and to be perfectly clear, I'm not anti-science. I consider myself a scientist. I have a Master's of Science degree, and I think it's very important. And it's just also important, though, to understand what the limitations are on science. Science is a set of methods where we study the world, try to gather data, systematically analyze it, and come up with conclusions about how the world is. Okay, and this is something called an empirical statement. Okay, an empiric statement is a statement that is about the world that is, right? On the bookshelf right now, I have 23 books. I am holding an electric guitar in my hand right now. This is, a thing of floss, right? That's an empirical statement. Now, a normative statement would be something like, you shouldn't use Glide. There's other brands of floss that are cheaper, right? The fact that another brand of floss is cheaper is an empirical statement. The fact that you shouldn't use Glide but use the cheaper one instead, that's a normative statement. And these are two very, very different things. Okay? So people confuse them all the time too. Well, that sounds like a scientific statement. No, should, anytime you say should or ought or you have to or something like that, that's a normative statement. And there's this divide called the is-ought problem. So is are empirical statements about the world that is, and ought is statements about the way the world should be. And how do you bridge that divide? It's not an easy thing to answer, right? So fire trucks are red, empirical statement. Fire trucks should be orange, normative statement. Why? Why should they be orange? Well, I like orange better. Okay. Do you guys see the difference here? Would you be able to identify an empirical statement and a normative statement? Okay. So, philosopher by the name of David Hume, who Hume Lake is probably not named after. Actually, I don't know. Have you guys ever been to Hume Lake? It's really nice. They actually have a coffee shop up there, which is something I always look for when I go to national parks. Hume Lake. Yeah, it's pretty. Who's it named after? The unincorporated community of Hume. Who's it named after? I don't know. It doesn't say. Okay. Yeah, it's alright. Orange is an amazing color. Yeah. So Hume Lake's up in the middle of like Kings Canyon National Park, but it's its own community there, and they have a Christian camp up there. But the coffee shop is the selling point. All right, so David Hume said there's no obvious way of connecting these two things. And this is something that has sort of bedeviled scientists and philosophers for a really long time, right? Now, sometimes the normative statements are pretty obvious, right? Like, let's take the COVID-19 pandemic, right? I think everybody agreed that less people getting COVID is better, right? Does anyone here like want everyone in the world to die of COVID-19? Probably not. In general, people from all walks of life are trying to minimize, the effects of the pandemic. Let's put it that way. Okay. And the problem is that people balance the different factors differently, right? So the big thing would be like mask mandates, vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, things like that. And so on one hand, like everybody kind of agrees, like less people getting COVID-19, the better. And then you have other issues like, like issues of liberty and freedom. Can the government mandate you get a vaccine, right? It's a bodily autonomy issue, right? Like we can't mandate that people, remove their wisdom teeth, right? But at the same time, one of the weird things about vaccines is that if you get a vaccine, you infect other people less, right? And so if you don't get vaccinated, then it's not just you. If you get infected, then you're going to be, on average, infecting other people as well. And so it's not just an issue that can be talked about in isolation, right? It's not like me choosing to paint my house blue or green, on the inside where nobody else can see it. Like, the vaccine issue affects other people as well as yourself. And it's a very dicey and sticky issue, right? Like, I think everybody can agree that there's been quite a lot of controversy over, where we divide these lines. We had shutdowns, we went back, then we shut down again. And there hasn't been a whole lot of consistency from universities and things like that as far as where we draw the line on things. And so this is an issue, right? Thanos mentality: less people, more resources. Yeah, Thanos would probably be all on board with killing half of humanity or something. But I think most people in this class have no desire to murder half the people on the planet. And so we have science, right? And science is always, especially for new things, like new data is always coming out. We have tentative results that may or may not hold up over time, and that causes problems, when like scientific guidance changes because a new study comes out and then they revise the guidelines. People get upset, like, well, yesterday you told me this, and now you're telling me this. Like Fox News does that all the time. They get mad when the science changes. It's like, well, this is a new disease and we're doing studies, and that's how it goes, right? But the issue of like, how much do you weigh liberty? How much do you weigh a human life, right? It's a tough question. That's a normative issue, right? What is one human life worth? If we shut down the entire world's economy to save one life, is that worth it? And some people would say yes, but at the same time, if you shut down the world's economy, it's probably going to kill more than one person, right? So people starve to death, right? So hope you go online again. I don't know. I have no idea. I at this point I can't even predict the future. I don't even try. It's so weird. So do you guys understand the difference here? So, you have the science, and roughly what if you get one person who's infected with COVID, on average, they'll infect this number of many people. Like, you can have those things, but, like, the question of, like, what to do about it, the science can't really answer that, right? Like, it can say, well, if you wear masks, maybe the infection rate changes from this to this, tentatively, data, but it can't tell you what you should do. Right? Science can't tell you should implement a vaccine passport. It can't do that. It can only say, this is what the science tells us, And then you have policymakers, in other words, senators and representatives here in America, and the president sometimes writes policy as well, who have to take the facts. Ideally, they take the facts and don't just make stuff up, right? They take the scientific facts and have to figure out what we should do as a result of that. Okay, so that's the is-ought problem, right? And a lot of people think that science can solve ethical problems and things like that, and it can't, right? Science can just tell you this is what the world is. There's currently a 20% chance of an earthquake. It can't, and maybe even like if you build a house this way, it'll reduce the risk of a house collapse. But it can't tell you should mandate housing safety, like these rules for earthquake, is there's always a trade-off. There's always cost and benefit. That's one of the key things I keep hammering on you guys in a critical thinking class. There's always cost and benefit analysis, right? If it cost $1 billion to make a house that will never fall down in an earthquake, it's worthless because you spent too much money building a house, right? Nobody could afford it, right? But if it cost 1 cent and the 1 cent reduced your chance of a house falling in an earthquake by 50%, yeah, absolutely do it. Like it's a cost-benefit analysis. Okay. Normative statements sound like ethical hedonism being put into play. Well, no. Well, yes, but also no. So a lot of times that's the naive view. And a lot of people who think that science can solve ethical issues, like Sam Harris, have a very sort of naive utilitarian view, where they're just like, well, if we implement a mask mandate, then you can look at the cost benefit in terms of just purely in terms of like health outcomes, and then you make your ruling based on which will have the best health outcomes. But it can't weigh things like liberty, right? It can't weigh things like bodily autonomy, right? There's no room in there for that calculation, and so it's when you move from is to ought, you have to use an ethical framework. And yes, Raymar, you're right. A lot of people just use a very naive form of ethical hedonism, where they're just like, all right, we'll just see which one's going to result in more deaths, right? But for most people, that's insufficient because most people are not ethical hedonists, right? They they believe, like in America, like we talked about, like America is founded on the principle of natural right theory, right? And so a lot of people will say, yeah, that's all well and good, but I have a right to life, liberty, and property, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and so you can't tell me what to do. And that's a source of conflict in our society, right? As people get mad about being forced to be vaccinated, and even in France and countries like that, they don't have the same natural rights tradition that we have here. There were widespread riots in France against the vaccine mandate, right? So, yeah, and so you move from is to ought using an ethical system. Okay. And ethical hedonism is one of the options. How do you go from how the world is to how the world should be? Okay. How do you move from science to ethics? You have to use an ethical framework. Okay, so let's do another fallacy. Might have one more for you before the midterm. So this one is called the Naturalistic Fallacy, and the source of it is a cognitive bias called the Status Quo bias. We like things staying the same. As humans, we have these two twin competing drives. One for things to remain the same. I'm happy here. I'm comfortable. I don't want things to change, and we're terrified to a certain extent of change, unless things are really bad, in which case you want change, right? But like in general, like when you're kind of comfortable and you're kind of like things are going well, you got your life kind of in order. Yeah, you just want things not to change. And so we have a strong bias to oppose any form of change. Like even in California, which is a very liberal state, when a proposition came up to ban gay marriage, it was banned because gay marriage had never been legal. And so California voted against gay marriage, right? Because it was a status quo. And then after a judge overturned it, then all of a sudden the status quo is gay marriage is cool. And then everyone's for it, and it's just like, well, what happened? Did 9 million people die or something in the last 4 years? No, it's just however the things are, the way that things should be. And that's called the naturalistic fallacy. The way that things are the way that things should be. And well, that's just how it is. You've probably heard people say that before, right? That's just how things are. Yeah. And the most common time this comes up is like if you're like at REI, and so this ties into like all the kind of like hippie like this is a natural product, like it's a natural thing, so it's good for you, which is 100% a fallacy, right? There's plenty of things in nature that will kill you dead, right? Like don't lick the mushrooms, like they're perfectly they're very natural, and a lot of them will kill you dead, right? Is that why incumbents have a big advantage? Yeah, because we're just used to a person being in office, and also there's some structural problems with how our campaign funding works and things like that. Incumbents tend to get a huge money advantage because people donate money to incumbents because it's a legal form of bribery, and incumbents win 90% of the time, and so it's a safe bet to give money to somebody who's an incumbent. And so as a result, challengers have a serious money deficit problem. And you're going up against demographics most of the time, right? Very few districts in America are competitive anymore. Almost all districts nowadays are safe districts, which means that the one of the parties has like a large margin over the other, and that's a hard thing to overcome, especially with the incumbent advantage as well. So, there's some issues there. Yeah. So, yeah, a naturalistic fallacy would be like, I only sleep on, sheets made out of bamboo because they're natural. Polyester is not a natural material, so it's bad for you. Bamboo is natural, so it's good for you. So, yeah, plenty of things in nature will kill you dead. Trust me. As somebody who likes backpacking, just because something's natural doesn't mean it's the way it should be. And so, it's kind of two related things here. Like, a lot of people for a long time claim that slavery was natural, right? And so, you go back to the Civil War era, you can find arguments being made that it's just the natural state of man for one man to enslave another, right? It's just how things are. It's natural. Right? It's natural for men to be, the dominant members of, and so that's the Izzat fallacy, right? Because you can look at how things are, right, and just derive from that Izzat problem, right? This is the way things are, therefore it's the way things should be, And if you don't have an ethical framework that justifies that, it's a fallacy. Too much of anything will kill you. It's true. Yeah, it's true. You can die from drinking too much water. Did you guys know that? It's called hyponatremia. There was a radio DJ who did like a water drinking contest and killed a person. Hyponatremia. And you run out of electrolytes in your blood, basically. There's, yeah, whatever. So, yeah, don't drink too much water. Like, you want to drink water, but, like, when these people like chugging gallons of water or something, it killed them. Okay. It floods your brain. No, it's what happens is that if your E-light levels drop too much, then your nerves and all these things require E-lights to run. You have sodium, potassium, and calcium, which are your electrolytes in your blood. That's what makes the nerves work. It opens up gates. The ions flow. That causes a voltage potential, and that causes your muscle to contract. And then there are pumps that pump the electrolytes back in. If you don't have any electrolytes, none of that works, and guess what? Your heart doesn't beat, and you die. So, don't take that as medical advice. I'm not a doctor, but I did work on heart cell simulations, on this kind of stuff. Okay, so yeah, we've already gone over that. So naturalistic fallacy, status quo bias are related. They're a little bit different. As always, the cognitive bias is the underlying problem in your brain, but it's not. It's even hard to call it a problem because it's when you're comfortable, you're comfortable. You know what I mean? It kind of makes sense to want things to stay the same. And to be fair, there's an opposing drive, right? And that the opposing drive is a drive for change, right? If you get bored, like people get bored when things are just the same all the time, right? Like people look forward to the changing of the seasons, right? Except here in Fresno, when the changing of the season means it's going to go from being nice right now to Huitzcoatl, the angry Aztec sun god, Huitzcoatl. Yeah. So the Aztec sun god comes out in Fresno, and, But a lot of places they look forward to the seasons changing. Right, but and that's sort of the difference between conservatives and progressives, right? Progressives oftentimes want things. I mean, it's definitional actually. Progressives want things to progress. They want things to change. Conservatives, the reason why they're called conservatives is because they don't want things to change. That's and it almost is like the two. And inside of every human, we have both of those drives, right? We get bored if things are exactly the same every day. And at the same time, like if something changed every day, that's chaos and it's terrifying. Like if you look at what the poor people in Ukraine are going through right now, I'm sure every day there's like some new terror, there's some new, rockets are hitting in a new town and people are dying and they're finding mines on the ground and all this kind of stuff. Like nobody wants that level of chaos in their life. You know what I mean? Like too much, it's way too much change and not good change either. So, I think every human has both desires, and it's maybe one of the reasons why humans have a hard time being happy, right? Because we both want change, and we also want things to stay the same. Right? Kids don't want to grow up, but at the same time, they want to grow up. You're a parent, you don't want your kids to grow up, at the same time, you want them to grow up. It's one of those things, and it explains, like at a very fundamental level, the difference between the two main political parties in America, right? Democrats have there's a spectrum inside all the parties, but Democrats have what's called the progressive wing, which are pushing for change in a whole bunch of different areas, and Republicans have a conservative wing that are pushing for things to stay the same, right? And which is right? Well, it comes down to the issue, and you have to weigh the pros and the cons, right? On everything, right? You can change things that are bad, but make sure you're not going to change them to be worse, right? Well, this system sucks. Okay. Well, is your alternative better? That's something that needs to be asked. All right. So what do you got? 20 minutes left. So what I would like to talk about is just have a little bit of fun until we go into the next midterm, right? And then we're going to finish off. We're going to do more programming after the midterm, after we come back from spring break. We'll just do something a little fun for the next 20 minutes, we call it. So, especially after talking about the Therac 25, my lord. Jeez. So, there's a lot of really interesting and beautiful things in computer science. And this phrase is kind of weird, right? Like beautiful computer science, right? Elden Ring stream, yeah, I'm just going to play video games you're going to watch. And then in the middle of the stream, I will give you the magic keyword, Flugelhorn. And then your quiz for tomorrow will just be like, what is the magic word? And the magic word is Flugelhorn. Yeah, I could just structure the entire class that way, just to make sure that people are watching the video and paying attention. In fact, I might actually do that. You guys all hear the magic word? Flugelhorn. There you go. I'll put a question for that on the quiz, to reward you all for watching the stream and not just like clicking through. It's one of the troubles with an asynchronous class is that if people actually don't watch the videos, then you're not learning anything, right? And then you potato on the midterm and you're like, oh, what happened? Well, if you're not watching the videos, not a whole lot I can do for you, So Florida. Yeah, yeah. Kid. It's funny. All right. So, yeah, there's a lot of beautiful things though in computer science, and it's kind of a weird notion. But let me give you a couple examples. So one of the cool things I've studied are fractals, and so a fractal is something that embodies the self-similarity principle. The self-similarity principle. And a self-similar object is something that looks the same when you zoom in on it and when you zoom out on it. Right? So if you look at a boulder, it kind of looks like a mountain. And if you zoom in on a boulder, you'll find a rock, and the rock kind of looks like a boulder. If you zoom in on that, you'll find a pebble, and the pebble kind of looks like the boulder. If you zoom in on that, you find grains of sand. The grains of sand kind of look like a boulder as well. Not exactly, the chemical properties are different. And you get really close, you'll find crystals and things like that. But in general, anything that looks the same at different levels of scale is self-similar. And there are a lot of things in computer science that lean on the self-similarity principle. If any of you are experienced computer science people, you've probably done things called linked lists and binary search trees and things like that. And those are ways of holding lots of data, I guess, is the best way of putting it. And they're self-similar. A linked list with a size 1 looks the same as a linked list of size 2, which looks the same as a linked list of size 100. It's self-similar. And so anytime you have self-similar things like that, well, I'll show you. There's this really interesting tie-in with things called recursion and graphics and things like that. So let me give you a graphical example. So start with a line. And I want you to just take the middle third and kink it. Just make it like a triangle. Okay? So get a piece of paper. Leah's absence was unusual because she usually was on time. That's vocabulary. Okay. So just, try it at home. All right, so make a line, take the middle third of the line, and kink it into a triangle. Okay, that's the rule. You start with a line, and you kink the middle third. And then you recursively repeat. So how many lines do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Do you see that? Apply the same rule to each one of those line segments. In other words, take the middle third of it and kink it. How long should the essay be? No, just answer the questions. You get points for answering the questions, not for length. You get something that looks like this. So each one of the middle thirds of the lines is kinked. Now do it again. Yep. And you end up getting something kind of cool. So you start off with just a line, and you kink the middle third. You do it again. You do it again. Do it again. 2D version. You make a beautiful snowflake. Very simple rule. Start with a line, kink the middle third. Repeat. Cactus, yeah. So this version is kind of cactus-like, but when you keep going, it turns into this really interesting curve that looks kind of like a snowflake, which is why it's called a koch or a koch. I don't know how to pronounce it. Snowflake. And then if you start with a triangle, then you end up getting something that actually looks like a snowflake, right? And this curve is incredibly difficult to describe mathematically, right? Like if I was your math professor and I said, I want you to graph this, thing, like, oh Lord, like I don't know how you do that, right? It's an incredibly complicated curve. But the rule that made it is incredibly simple. Given a line, take the, cut out the middle third and put a triangle there, basically, right? That makes sense? You guys see what I'm getting at? Through very simple rules, you can actually create very beautiful, very complicated, very interesting results. Yeah. So this is if you zoom in on a snowflake. It's kind of cool, right? Kind of trippy. It's like a Pink Floyd, laser light show or something. I don't know. And so in computer science, there's this notion of recursion. And recursion is when it works when you have a self-similar problem like this. And it allows you to do very simple programs a lot of times that have very complicated results. And they very much hurt the brains of the people trying to write them. If you've never done recursion before, like recursion hurts the brain. And it's kind of a cool thing. Like it hurts at the time. But like after you kind of grasp it, like if I just gave you this and I was like, make that happen, right? Make that happen. Right? You just be like, But it's just this, right? It's just that's all it is. And so maybe 2, 3, 4 lines of code create things that just have incredible complexity and beauty. And it hurts your brain, but like once you get it, you're like, oh, that's so cool. I understand it now. And so I always joke, the only way you can understand recursion is to do recursion. There are languages purely built on recursion, and it's horribly hard. It's horribly hard if you don't start with it. I met a guy who was an Amazon programmer, and his first programming language was, they didn't even have loops. All they had was recursion. And so every time you did something, you had to write a recursive thing to it. And for them, recursion was as natural as breathing. And when they had to learn how to do a for loop or something, they were like, it's too hard. Yeah. So the word sounds painful, recursion. Yeah. So it's, especially like when you take discrete math, like there's some problems in it. And let me pull one of these up just to show you what I'm talking about. This is my slides. I am a very professional professor. Let's see if I find an example here. Yeah, okay. So, Tramino, or is it trimino? I don't know. So there's a problem. Given a board, and you've got like L-shaped dominoes, right? Called trominoes, I don't know. Can you put them on the board so that you cover the entire board, except for one square? Okay, so the one square you can't put a piece on is right here, and then you've got to place these triminios in such a way that it will cover all the rest of the board. Can you do it? Is it doable, for one thing? And if so, write a program to do it. I will pause the recording now. If you know the answer already, don't say anything. But I'd like for you to post into chat, and if you're watching this at home, I'd like for you to post, how would you go about solving this? Because it seems absurdly difficult, right? There's an exponential number of different ways you can place and rotate the different pieces. How would you, given a board, in this case it's what, 7 by 7? Yeah, it's a 7 by 7 board. One of the squares you cannot place a triminio on, and you must cover the rest of the board in triminios. So I'm going to pause the recording, try coming up with an answer. Post on chat. So one of the students, Francisco, solved it for this case, sure, but I'm talking about solving the general case. If I give you a 7 by 7 board and I cut out one of the holes in it, it's a classic carnival game, by the way. There are games like this where you have to place pieces to cover a board. It's easy. Okay. Well, how do you do it for a 500 by 500 board? Okay. Make them all into squares of 2 by 3. Oh, interesting. Okay. So the trouble is, okay, there's a 2 by 3 there, 2 by 3 there. The trouble is some of these, like wherever you have the hole, you're not going to be able to do that, right? Because like you have to have one piece from the edge of the 2x3 next to you kind of coming into there to cover the spots that aren't part of it, right? So here is a proof of an algorithm to do this, and it looks like what? So let me just pause it. So given in this case, this is a 8x8 grid, okay, and all this is marked off, I guess. You could just mark off the one square here and then place another triminio here. It doesn't really matter. Basically, the proof is this. You prove that it works for a 2x2, right, which is just a single triminio, right? A 2x2 with one square missing, just this piece here. And then you prove that if you can make it work for a smaller size, you can make it work for a bigger size by taking whatever chunk is missing and, let's see, just gonna have to play it. And any of the solid areas, you see this is also a 2x2 with one chunk missing. You place basically one piece on the corner here, and then that turns all the other squares into a 2x2 with one square missing. You see that? And when you go, come on, play? No, play. Why is there no pause? Okay. And then when you go up to the next level, you still have exactly the same situation where you're missing one chunk. And no matter how many levels down you go, you can still solve it. And it's one of these. I'm not going to go into the full proof here because you're not in discrete math, but that's the kind of thing that you have to do in like third semester computer science. If you've not taken it yet, you have that to look forward to. If you are not a computer science major, run away. No, but seriously, you learn how to solve, like, because that's a very complicated pattern, right? But once you understand the pattern of it and you understand it, you're like, oh, giant light bulb turns on. You're like, oh, it's a really simple solution. Wow, okay, yeah, I can solve any of those. Oh, cool, but it hurts your brain, and a lot of people don't like computer science for that reason, because there are times in computer science where it feels like just people are grabbing your brain and just pulling it outwards like that. And recursion is one of them. Might make that your floor tile. Yeah, actually, when you're doing tiling, right, there's actually a lot of research in computer science on how to tile things, because like you have like a toilet, right, in your bathroom, and so the toilet goes into the ground. It's got a seal on it and stuff, bolts. And so if you're tiling with tiles, how do you go around the toilet without breaking your beautiful pattern? And a lot of people just cut a tile in half and just be like, eh. But like there's actually very interesting ways of like adjusting the pattern to fit around, obstacles and things like that, which is kind of cool. And, if you get into like the theory of tiling and stuff like that, you can actually make these really beautiful patterns that just go around the toilet, and aren't just like you just get a saw and go through the porcelain or whatever, So, yeah, and so recursion is one of those things where, it's on one side very simple, and the other side just like, my brain, it hurts, and it's so cool, after you go through after you learn it, it's cool. Before you learn it, you're just like questioning your life. Okay, so divide and conquer is another very common practice in computer science. A lot of times when you're given a really complicated problem, you split it into smaller pieces, and then you solve the simple, smaller pieces. And this is a habit where even if you are not a computer science major, this is a skill to learn. Because there will be times in life where you're given a complicated problem. I don't care if you're, an artist or an engineer or a surgeon or whatever. You are going to encounter problems in your life that are going to be complicated. They're going to be complex. They require multiple steps and multiple things to happen and things like that. And so studying divide and conquer is good. It will help you. Computational thinking is what this is called. Computational thinking are sort of the underlying skills needed for computer science. And if you know them, it helps you not just in computer science, but like, everywhere in life. Okay. So for example, let's say you wanted to navigate from San Diego to New York. There's like an exponential number of routes you could take, right? Like, you can go north this way and go east this way. There's just so many different ways that you could travel from San Diego to New York. It just seems like impossible to come up with a fastest route. But if you just replace it with like, all right, what's the fastest route between San Diego and Phoenix? Let's say, well, you just take the I-80 east. That's okay. That's basically what it comes down to. What's the fastest route between San Diego and Vegas? And take the I-15. That's it. What's the fastest route between San Diego and San Francisco? Well, the I-5. Maybe the 101. You have to compare those two, right? The 101. And then you solve smaller problems, and then you use those smaller problems to say, all right, well, what's the fastest route to Salt Lake, right? You start in San Diego, and then you go to the cities that are neighboring San Diego, Phoenix, Vegas, LA technically, but we don't like to talk about LA, San Francisco. And then you go to the next level of cities out, like El Paso in Texas, Salt Lake in Utah, Portland, Oregon, or something. I don't know why you go that way to go to New York, but who knows? Maybe there's a faster route that way. And then you say, all right, well, what's faster to get to Salt Lake? Through Vegas or through Phoenix? And you compare those two options. You write the fastest one down. All right, what's the fastest way of getting to El Paso? Through Salt Lake or through Phoenix? Okay, through Phoenix. Okay, write that one down. And as you go along, you solve a bunch of really small, simple problems. And at the end of the day, you end up with a route from San Diego to New York without having to try every combination of every road in America, right? And computers can actually solve that problem reasonably quickly. In fact, when you use Google Maps and things like that, they probably have pre-calculated the shortest routes from pretty much any city in America to any city in America. It's probably already done. And the only thing they need to check when you punch in your thing into nav, okay, I'm going to drive from Fresno to Vegas, the only thing they need to check is like road conditions, right? So like if, Tehachapi is closed, right? Which happens, right? There's snow occasionally and stuff like that. If the Grapevine's closed, if Tehachapi is closed, you have to update and then reroute. One of the worst drives I did was going to LA when the Grapevine was closed. Oh, Lord. Had to go out over that pass, heading kind of through, what was it called? All that oil country out there on the southwest side of the Central Valley, and all the traffic off the I-5 was going out that way too. Oh, it was a mess. Just fly where we're going. We don't need roads. Yeah, probably should have. Probably should have. We were already on the road, and then the Grapevine closes down. And we're like, oh goodness, And that turned a 4-hour drive into like a 10-hour drive. So yeah, so you have to update, right? But do you guys kind of get what I'm getting at here? If you have a big, complicated problem, you solve the smaller parts first, and you assemble the smaller parts into a solution for the bigger part. And yeah, like if you're an engineer, you're building something. All right, we need to work on this small problem, this small problem, this small problem. Once we get the three of them done, we integrate them together to build a bigger solution. Things like that. Okay. Yeah, just one of those really good, really powerful habits of mind. Now, I'm going to give you a no. You know what? You already have the Therac 25 thing. So I'm not going to give you something else on top of that. I'll just give you a quiz for today. Okay. So remember the magic word is flugelhorn, and yeah. Do you guys want to do the Triminio puzzle, or do you want to just do a multiple choice quiz for today? I'll give you the option for that. Puzzle? Okay. You like the puzzle? All right. I'll find a puzzle for y'all to solve, and it'll be worth more points than a quiz, I guess. Multiple choice? Multiple choice. Uh-oh. All right. We got 4 multiple choice, and 3 puzzles. Elden Ring. You have to beat Elden Ring to get extra credit. You don't care, to be honest. Goodness. We need more votes on chat right now. Do you want to solve a puzzle, or do you want to take a multiple choice quiz? Multiple choice. Okay, fine. All right. Less fun, but probably less time as well. All right. So that is our class for today. Hopefully you understand what we talked about. Naturalistic fallacy. Naturalistic fallacy is the way things are, the way that things should be. Contrawise, or alternatively, natural things are good for you. And you see that all the time at REI. This has no artificial, and recursion, and a little bit of divide and conquer. That's our topics for today. Wednesday, we're going to talk about our midterm review, and then Friday, you'll get the midterm. All right. Recursion sounds like a pain. It is until you understand it. Then it's great. All right. See you guys. Will you post the practice midterms? Yeah. I'll put them up. I'll put them up right now for you, so you can start looking at them now if you want. Okay. Peace.